Thembisile FSP 54211. There's been great developments which have been very interesting. It is apparent that the G20 has come with a great change, and the presidency has been at work. One could imagine if it's only one day, or rather 2 days. It's only since the 1st of December that the official handover of the G20 has happened. And in the light of a day, which is yesterday, I think yesterday was the 3rd of December, where we saw great developments happen in a day. In the morning, we saw a session which answered our international relations and the stance of the country mostly. But beyond the stance of the country in the international relations, it was how we respond to the international attention that has come due to the tweets that have been made, and showing the diplomacy maybe of us handling issues in response to the AGOA agreements, Donald Trump. Mostly what I thought was most interesting was how we were going to respond, considering the efficiency as it to an extent, the efficiency role played by Elon Musk, as it to an extent does put South Africa in the international relations with the US and the agreement in a certain position, considering investments in and out between the countries and all that. So the president stood out and rather gave a directive, or rather showed a positive approach towards the situation by handling it in a diplomatic manner, by saying we still have to continue and treat such in a positive manner, even though all that has happened. But we see him being diplomatic about everything, considering the opportunity costs that might arise. Sometimes one considers beyond, because a nation is not just running maybe your own business, where today you will just take things from a personal perspective, but we do consider it from a diplomatic perspective. We saw them rather go through that in the morning, which was rather a changing, or rather a very effective, or one of the key highlights that to an extent put people at ease, as our currency does get affected by these kind of stances, as we'd be talking about the US dollar to the rand. Number two, the main thing that became positive from me when I thought of it from a closer perspective, was that the main thing they're fighting was that the introduction of a BRICS currency. But what the president emphasized in his speech was that we are getting closer to the key players in the prominent institutions. So we're talking your IMF, we're talking your your World Bank. So, as South Africa taking a stance of saying, wait, we don't have to act like that just because of they're saying whatever they're saying about BRICS Bank. But that does not stop us saying that whatever developmental agenda we have, that was going to be implemented by the introductions of new systems or mechanisms in the BRICS Bank or the BRICS currency, if we were to go for the BRICS currency. But then we're talking 12 months. But either than that, if we are saying that we're going to approach the IMF and the World Bank with a developmental agenda, and we're saying that we're going to express it through BRICS, I don't see any gap, or rather anything that would change that from us saying that we are going to express it through the IMF and the World Bank. One of the key things that we're going to talk about, what he highlighted, was the repayment of debt, saying that the repayment of debt that actually hinders in the progress of Africa and the developing South. That's considered in the G20 now, saying that the lendings and the infrastructure of the debt itself. So when you approach the lending institutions, or when you approach the lending mechanisms that are implemented by the World Bank and IMF, one of the key things that we should consider is the structuring of the loans. When you structure a loan or the loan repayments whatsoever, they must start being favorable, or must start speaking what the developing countries and the status thereof reflects. When you go talk sovereign risk and country risk of a particular country, number one, your credit ratings, number two, those are the key determinants that actually ends up giving out the interest rates that countries pay their debt. So us having those key players in close proximity or close to us starts giving us an opportunity of saying that we must start talking to the IMF and the World Bank. We now have them in close proximity. We don't have to get close with the BRICS Bank. The currency will come on a later stage. There's a lot of debt that's sitting there that's supposed to have been dealt with accordingly, at which us dealing with it accordingly would give the countries an opportunity to go and fix their infrastructure or get more lendings and capital to do other stuff. So what we're saying is, us approaching the counter risk and the sovereign risk, we start going to the determinants that which are used, and to whether they have been fair to Africa, number one, and to whether those lendings, because when you're talking a developing country and when you're talking a developed country, you start talking different conditions. So their approach towards the debt, or rather the indicators, or rather the risks that have been taken out, it's time we start now getting closer to saying that we are dealing with a developmental agenda. So those countries must start approaching Africa in a different perspective. With that in mind, we're talking the country risk now, and saying that some of the indicators and risks that which might find ourselves in, that you find in the developed countries, they're not so much that we would find in our side. And to an extent, what agreements that have been made. I remember there was a session last year at which the president with President Sassou Nguesso, they were in France. The president highlighted that you have been promising funding to us, saying that you are going to do this, you're going to do this. But even till date, nothing as such has been made. We want answers when you leave here. So I feel like having the G20 presidency and starting to have a diplomatic approach to what has been done and that have been handled, we start having an opportunity of saying that within those institutions we are dealing with key players. We have a year, so we are going to be able to affect those to start reflecting the status quo, so that we start now having the G20 Africa and the global South countries starting to get closer to being given rather fair approaches to those systems, because of most of the economic situations or conditions that we find ourselves in are rather sometimes because of those key players, or rather not key players, but because of the key and the superpowers and their interventions within our countries. Now we find ourselves in positions at which we now have to deal with that, but not consider what the superpowers have left as an impact. So that's Africa and the global South. Secondly, we became happy to see the developments of the bi country commission, and that was signed by the international relations ministers between South Africa and Nigeria. Those are developments that happened yesterday. It rather became one of those positive approaches when you see the Vision 2063. In the morning, you must understand they emphasized the Vision 2030 about your equality, sustainability, and all three sustainability, equality, yeah, of the Vision 2030, and rather of the global South. So we saw them emerge when they got to Nigeria, their emphasis on Vision 2063, which rather made me think of the correction that the governor made on it was the financial stability review or financial stability session they had last week, where he said that we must start considering these terms in a different light. We are no longer going to say wars and whites and fights, and we're going to call it geopolitical fragmentations. So our approach to Vision 2063 and such agreements gives us an opportunity, or gives us a new light and positive, some positivity when it gets to Vision 2063, that our languages and our conducts and the way we do things will be the one that puts our country or the world in a better position when it comes to Vision 2063. So it was rather a very fruitful day, considering that it was so many events in one day. We saw the business led by Minister Pakster, also the businesses sat down with South Africa, Nigeria, which was very very good. We know that within the G20 there is also a B20, which was a really good build-up. We see that by the time we get to November next year, things would really be reflecting what we actually go through. So in our mission for solidarity, equality, and development for the G20, we rather start being positive and seeing things go forward. We're looking forward to the next year, in seeing how we progress with our Sustainable Development Vision 2030 goal, and the Vision 2063 goal. In the midst of everything, we know that when you consider all these, the main thing and the main vision that's on hand is your COP28, COP29, COP28, 29 climate change resolutions them starting to have an impact in and being embedded in our financial institutions and models, saying that they must start now. The vision that's the light of the political or geopolitical situation that's going. Things are smoothing down. We're starting to talk climate change. We're starting to talk geopolitical fragmentations. We're starting to talk Vision 2063. We start talking sustainable development. So that's rather very good and a rather great position. So in the light and conclusion of everything, we just see the hard work that the president and one could imagine how much work they're going through, having to make a stance like that after Donald Trump or the US have made the statement publicly, and we have to stand up as a country and say that let's cool down and just deal with things in a diplomatic manner. So we rather commend them for the position that which they took and the way they have handled everything. Thembisile, FSP 54211.